Star Trek: The Next Generation broke a big rule by making Captain Picard quote Captain Kirk. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, Jean-Luc Picard once declared, a statement that resonates deeply with his intellectual leadership style. But what happens when Star Trek: The Next Generation's cerebral captain quotes the very man who embodied the opposite style of command? What happens when Picard quotes Captain James T. Kirk? In Star Trek: First Contact, the second TNG movie, a heated moment sees Captain Picard channeling the passion of his most famous predecessor. Quoting Melville's Moby Dick, "From hell's heart, I stab at thee," Picard mirrors a line once delivered by Noonien Singh, Star Trek's most famous villain. But what most fans might miss is that by invoking this literary vengeance, and thereby echoing Captain Kirk's nemesis, Picard is also invoking Kirk himself, a character who Picard had long been written to not resemble. And in doing so, The Next Generation broke a big unspoken Star Trek rule. Starfleet captains had to be different. When Star Trek: The Next Generation launched in 1987, it bore the daunting legacy of the original series TOS and William Shatner's legendary portrayal of Captain James T. Kirk. Charismatic, passionate, womanizing, and always ready for action, Kirk became the quintessential Starfleet captain in the pop culture imagination. But Gene Roddenberry, the father of Star Trek, wanted The Next Generation to mark a clear evolution, not just in technology and galactic diplomacy, but in leadership. That's where Patrick Stewart's Jean-Luc Picard came in, a more contemplative, diplomatic, and intellectual figure than Kirk ever was. Roddenberry's vision for TNG included a Starfleet that had matured past brawling, phaser-firing bravado. In Roddenberry's future, humans no longer needed larger-than-life cowboy captains. So, unwritten though it was, the rule became clear: Picard should never act like Kirk. And yet, over time, the barrier began to blur. And nowhere is this more apparent than when Picard, in an emotionally vulnerable state, channels Kirk's style and words in Star Trek: First Contact. First Contact with vengeance? By the time Star Trek: First Contact hit theaters in 1996, Picard had evolved far from the stiff diplomat of TNG Season 1. Now he was a battle-hardened survivor of Borg assimilation, his calm demeanor increasingly cracking under emotional pressure, especially when faced with his most terrifying enemy. When the Borg once again threaten Earth, Picard's trauma resurfaces. His orders become increasingly reckless. In a key moment, his crew pleads with him to retreat and destroy the Enterprise rather than allow the Borg to take it. But Picard refuses. He's obsessed. And then comes the line. In a chilling monologue, Picard slams a display and growls, "No! They invade our space, and we fall back. They assimilate entire worlds, and we fall back. Not again. The line must be drawn here. This far, no further. And I will make them pay for what they've done." It's a powerful scene, one that fans consider among Patrick Stewart's finest. But the rage and obsession draw stark parallels not just to Captain Ahab, but to Captain Kirk's nemesis Khan, who once shouted the same Melville line in The Wrath of Khan, "From hell's heart, I stab at thee." And that's where the illusion shatters. In quoting a literary villain and echoing a Starfleet captain known for breaking rules, Picard becomes Kirk-like, passionate, vengeful, emotionally compromised. It's a moment where TNG breaks the rule it had clung to for nearly a decade. And it worked perfectly. The purpose of the rule and why it was meant to be broken, the contrast between Kirk and Picard wasn't just for show. It was design. TNG's mission wasn't just to continue Star Trek, but to evolve it. By the late 80s, society had changed. Audiences were hungry for more thoughtful science fiction, and Roddenberry was determined to distance the new Trek from the rough and tumble adventure of the 60s. Picard was envisioned as the antithesis of Kirk, older, more reserved, more philosophical. Where Kirk might punch his way out of trouble, Picard would talk, debate, and reason. He quoted Shakespeare, not Sun Tzu. He sipped Earl Grey, not Romulan ale. And for years, this contrast defined the character. But over time, the showrunners realized that one key element was missing: emotional vulnerability. And to explore that, Picard had to break character. He had to tap into that raw humanity that Kirk wore on his sleeve. So by the time First Contact came around, the writers intentionally took Picard into a place he'd never been before, a place Kirk had lived in. And to drive the point home, they made him quote the same literature that defined Khan's madness, and therefore Kirk's greatest challenge. Subverting the archetype, Star Trek has always thrived when it subverts expectations. The decision to let Picard behave like Kirk, even briefly, was not just character evolution, but meta-commentary. It acknowledged that the Kirk model wasn't inferior. In fact, in moments of passion and principle, it was essential. Ironically, Picard's Ahab-like obsession in First Contact made him more relatable. He wasn't a perfect philosopher anymore, he was human. He could be petty, angry, vengeful. And it made his eventual redemption when he takes Lily's words to heart and orders the Enterprise's self-destruction all the more powerful. This was a Kirk arc in a Picard package. And that made it Star Trek at its best. The legacy connection, generations. Of course, First Contact wasn't the first time Picard and Kirk were thematically linked. The 1994 film Star Trek, Generations literally brought the two captains face to face. Their team-up may have been polarizing, but it laid the groundwork for First Contact. In Generations, Picard admits to being haunted by the idea that his life lacks the excitement and boldness of Kirk's. He's introspective, philosophical, but part of him envies Kirk's gut. Kirk, in turn, tells Picard something profound. Don't let them promote you. Don't let them do anything that takes you off the bridge of that ship, because while you're there, you can make a difference. It's a moment that cements the Kirk archetype, passion, purpose, drive, as something even Picard admires. So when Picard finally lashes out in First Contact, it's not a betrayal of character, it's the culmination of a long character arc. The Kirk within him, long suppressed, finally speaks. And quoting Khan, and by extension, Kirk breaks the unwritten TNG rule in the most poignant way possible. Why it mattered. In hindsight, the moment Picard quotes that line from Hell's Heart is more than a reference. It's a narrative tool. It proves that even the most reasoned, balanced minds can fall prey to obsession. It shows that great captains, whether Kirk or Picard, are human first. And it acknowledges that the line between logic and passion, diplomacy and vengeance, is dangerously thin. By breaking the rule of Picard is not Kirk, Star Trek did what it has always done, challenged its own ideals, evolved its characters, and trusted the audience to understand that complexity makes heroes better, not worse. Echoes in modern Trek. Interestingly, Star Trek Picard, the recent Paramount Plus series, builds even further on the concept. Older, more reflective, and more emotionally vulnerable than ever, this version of Jean-Luc is entirely post-First Contact. He mourns his mistakes. He admits his regrets. He even reconnects with aspects of his past he once tried to suppress. The Kirk rule is long gone. Now, Picard is allowed to be as passionate as Kirk ever was, just in his own way.